Okay, Dr. St. John here. Let's finish up this Electro-Poly example. And I put in blue here. Here's my objective function. I haven't done it yet. Let's just do it real quick. Equals sum product, open parenthesis, give it the range of decision variables. I have those in yellow, comma, give it the range of associated coefficients in green, those two ranges, enter. It's in there right now. There's a 0. That's because there are no numbers in the decision variables, and Excel treats nothing as zeros. So let's go down here. Now we want to put our constraints. I've got my decision variables together. I've got my coefficients below the decision variables, just like before. It's just that they're in tables. And now I put my constraints below that. So I've got well, the first constraint is I have to make sure that I provide, the contract is for providing 3,000 of model 1, 2,000 of model 2, and 900 of model 3. So let's put that in here. The amount needed. Oh, let's make it look just like there. That's a format painter. You just go grab the paintbrush and it'll do it just like these others. And I need 3,000 of model 1, 2,000 of model 2. Notice that I have 2,000 in column C, and my decision variable for model 2 is in, all of it is in column C. So in C4 I have make model 2. In C5 I have buy model 2. In C7 I have the coefficient associated with make model 2. In C8 I have the coefficient associated with buy model 2. And now down here in my constraints I still have it lined up by column. 2,000 is the cost associated, it's not the cost, I'm sorry, it's the amount of model 2 I need. And what is that? Make or buy, it doesn't matter. So this is going to be, when I enter this constraint in, this is going to be an equal sign. Up here is number available they have, procured, any of that's fine. This is just a label, right? So here, this had better equal 3,000, right? So let's put our formula in. Equals, well, you know what? Decision, model 1 make, that's B4, plus model 1 buy from down the factory down the street, that had better be equal to 3,000. So when I enter it in, this row 10, that's the left-hand side of the constraint, and row 11 will be the right-hand side. But notice I don't have it separated by left-hand and right-hand side. I've got the left-hand side above and the right-hand side below. You just have to enter it in that way when you do it. So B4 to B5. Now let's think about that. If I copy this formula over, it's going to increment. This is a relative address. I don't have dollar signs, so it's not fixed. So instead of B4 plus B5, when I copy it over, it'll be C4 plus C5, and then I copy it over once more, it'll be D4 and D5. Well, that's exactly what I want. So let's copy it over. Let's verify that it changed. B4 and B5, that's model 1, make and buy. Add them together, better equal 3,000. C4 and C5, I'm reading off the formula bar up here. That's what's in here, even though it's displaying a 0. That's model 2 make and model 2 buy added together. That had better equal 2,000. And then D4 plus D5, that's model 3 make and buy, and that had better equal to 900. So there are my first 3 constraints. The total number of model 1 needs to equal 3,000. The total number of model 2 needs to equal 2,000. And the total number of model 3 needs to equal 900. 3 constraints, and that makes sure that I fulfill my contract. Let's see what's next. Hours required. So this is the whole reason I had to outsource to the factory down the street is because I have a limited number of Excel Smart had figured out what I wanted to do with the. I had a limited number of wiring hours and a limited number of harnessing hours available. See, Excel has figured out that that those are labels and they're formatted, that I like to format them that way, so it just continues it. Sometimes it can be too smart and think you mean something that you don't. So again, I'm still lined up with column B, except the wiring hours and the harnessing hours, these two constraints are only associated with make. They're not, the guy down the street has said, hey, I'll make Model 1 for $61 a piece. I'll make Model 2 for $97 a piece. He can deal with his own wiring and harnessing constraints. He said he can do them, so he can do them. I'm only worried about in-house. I have a certain amount of wiring hours and a certain amount of harnessing hours. And what I'd like to do, since I can make it cheaper, it'll cost me less to make as many in-house as I can. I want to provide Solver with these constraints and say, you know, as many as possible I'll make in-house and everything else outsource. So let's see. Wiring, I have, it requires 2 hours. This is in hours. 2 hours to wire up Model 1 and 1 hour to harness Model 1. It requires 1.5 hours to wire Model 2, and it requires 2 hours to harness Model 2. It requires 3 hours to wire Model 3 and 1 hour to harness Model 3. So those are the left-hand side. Let's do like before and call this left-hand side. And then we can have our sign. I don't need to label that. Let's just, this is a little sign. We'll make it smaller. And this is the right-hand side. So let's start with the right-hand side. I have 10,000 hours available. 10,000 hours available of wiring. So whatever the left-hand side is, it had better be less than or equal to 10,000. Same with the next one. I have 5,000 hours of harnessing hours available. Let's put my commas in there to make it consistent. And then the left-hand side. Again, these constraints are in terms of the decision variables, just like I did up here in cell B10 through D10. Equals sum product. The first range is going to be, of course, these constraints, those three, and then a comma, and then the range that corresponds to this range. So the range that corresponds to B14 to D14. Remember, this is only making it, so it'll be B4 through D4. You see that? Enter. Now, I'm only copying it down one, but still, the range pointing to the decision variables, B4 through D4, I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to hit F4, which adds the dollars in there. Do you see up here in the formula bar? It adds the dollar signs before the columns and the rows, which makes it an absolute reference. As I copy it down, even though I'm only copying it down one, I don't want it to change those decision variables. All of these constraints are in terms of the decision variables. As I copy it down, I want it to keep pointing there. So now I can go to the lower right-hand corner, grab the fill handle and pull it down 1. And there we go. Now I'm going to go to the objective function. Let's go to data, solver. E5 is set objective is E5. So that first one, let me pull it over here. The first one needs to be my objective function. This is a minimize, so let's make sure and click the radial button for min. And we're not setting any values. Sometimes we have some target amount that we're looking at. By changing cells, that's going to be my decision variables in yellow, the whole range of B4 to D5. So I put that in there, subject to the constraints. Let's add the constraints. Add the first constraint. The first constraint is going to be, since this is I need 3,000, 2,000, and 900, and again the top here, these zeros, those are that's the left-hand side of my constraint, and I need to change the sign to equal, and then the right-hand side is going to be 3,000, 2,000, 900. I could have put this constraint down, written it kind of like the wiring and the harnessing, and have left-hand side and right-hand side. That's fine. It's just showing you two different ways. Sometimes it's better one or the other. It makes more sense. I'm going to add that. And then the next constraint, left-hand side, I'm entering the wiring and the harnessing together. So the left-hand side is E14 through E15. Sign looks good. The right-hand side is G14 to G15. I'm going to click OK. Make on constrained variables non-negative, so I'm not going to be providing negative slip rings with this contractor. They're going to be upset. This is simplex LP, and then hit solve. And over here, the objective function, I just need to widen it up. It wasn't displaying. And I can go over here and formatted currency, and there you go. Is that right? Yep, looks good. The answer's on page 70. Thank you.